I have committed no crime except being a Baha'i. Goodbye, my dear Baha'i friends. I am to be executed in 2 more hours by a firing squad. Please pray for the progress of my soul.
The people whose photographs you have just seen were all executed because they were Baha'is, followers of the Prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. They were executed in Iran in the early 1980s at the height of the Iranian Revolution. Kia ora and welcome to Baha'i On Air. I'm Bev Watson. In the next 2 episodes you will hear a poignant story of suffering and courage. It is the story of the Baha'is of Iran who refused to accept the role of victims, even when subjected to intense persecution. It is a story that inspires hope for the future. At a time when the world is rapidly moving towards an acceptance of the oneness of humankind, a basic teaching of the Baha'i faith, the abuse of human rights in any culture and any country cannot be tolerated. The Holocaust in Nazi Germany, ethnic cleansing in the Balkan states, tribal genocide in Rwanda, and far too many other atrocities show that the human spirit in any culture and any country can be subjected to dark and irrational forces. At the same time, however, there is a power in the human spirit that can overcome these dark forces. In the next 2 episodes, we will look at a wonderful story of the light of faith shining out against the darkness of ignorance and prejudice. It is the story of the Baha'is of Iran as they face up peacefully to their persecutors. We will look at the reasons why the persecution began and how it continues. While doing so, we wish to stress that the Baha'is are not anti-Iran, far from it. Baha'is have a great love for Iran. It is, after all, the birthplace of their faith. However, Baha'is have been subjected to intense persecution in that country, with tens of thousands of deaths in the early years and the continuing abuse of their human rights to this very day. Baha'is are not protected under the Iranian constitution and are regarded as unprotected infidels. Some still remain in prison solely because of their faith. In order to understand the reason why this persecution occurs, we need to know about the appearance of a new religious message in Iran in the 1840s and the reaction of the religious establishment of the time. In 1844, some 1200 years after the life and death of His Holiness the Prophet Muhammad, a young Persian man known as the Bab began to prepare humanity for the arrival of a great, new and universal messenger of God, Baha'u'llah. As a result, the Bab, an Arabic name meaning the gate, was considered a heretic and an infidel. He and more than 20,000 of his followers were killed. In 1863, Baha'u'llah claimed to be the one foretold by the Bab. He brought a new revelation that, like all the revelations of the past, came in 2 parts. The first comprises the spiritual teachings. These are common to all faiths and never change. They talk about the need to develop the capacity for love, compassion, trustworthiness, integrity, forgiveness, and all the other virtues. The second part comprises the social teachings, which refer to such things as burial, marriage, diet, the treatment of criminals, and so on. Baha'u'llah taught the equality of men and women, the essential harmony between science and religion, the need for each individual to search for truth independently of others, and he abolished the clergy. These teachings were largely rejected, partly because they were perceived as being contrary to the teachings of Muhammad, and partly because Muslims interpret the teachings of Muhammad to mean that there will be no messengers of God after him. As a result, Baha'u'llah, like the Bab, was considered a heretic and an infidel. So too are his followers. Thus, despite the fact that Baha'is recognize and accept Islam, a history of religious persecution and the deliberate misrepresentation of the Baha'i faith began in Iran. It has continued over the years with varying degrees of intensity and despite changes in government. With the 1979 revolution in Iran, militant fundamentalism reawakened the spirit of fanaticism, and the persecution of the Baha'is intensified. We begin this episode of Baha'i on Air by examining one example of the dark side of the human spirit. Mona Mahmoudnejad was a 17-year-old high school student who was hanged at the height of the Iranian Revolution on 18th June 1983, along with 9 other Baha'i women. A few years later, Baha'is in North America, outraged at this incident, decided to tell her story in a music video. It was made in Canada in 1986 and was directed and photographed by a New Zealander, Rodney Charters.
Mona Mahmoudnejad was arrested with her father on October 23, 1982. She was imprisoned for 9 months in Shiraz and interrogated many times. On June 18, 1983, she was sentenced and executed with 9 other Baha'i women. Her only crime was being a Baha'i. Mona's story has had a profound effect on many people. And one of these people, a composer and producer named Jack Lenz, asked me several months ago to write a song about Mona.
Okay, let's come down.
The whole Mona project, as we are now calling it, started with a song. Doug Cameron has been a very good friend of mine and a Baha'i friend through lots of different projects. And I asked Doug Cameron, when he was staying at our home here, if he would write a song about Mona, the youngest of the 10 women who had been killed in Shiraz. He readily consented, knowing that it would be a difficult task. The song was originally called Mona with the Children, and I felt that he had captured a great deal of the sort of spirit of this girl in the song.
I can see her in my heart. The whole world was falling apart. She said, this is where I've got to be. A captive in the light. A love that burns so bright. This is where I've got to be. When they asked her, what could she say? She said,
was trying to write a song about Mona, I found it pretty difficult because I didn't have an idea that could express, I thought very well, what her experience would have been or what she would have wanted the expression of her experience to be. And then I got the idea of dancing, and the idea that she was dancing and that we were dancing and that the world was dancing. And I found out later that when her sister went to visit her in the prison for the last time, Mona asked her sister to do her a favor, and that favor was that she would pray that Mona would go to her execution dancing. So I was pretty happy because this image dancing seemed so important to her in the song.
Send your love to me. Send your love. Precious love. Dancing. Every precious moment will be free.
It feels good.
Almost 12 months ago, they talked to me about was the feasibility of doing a video about it. And at the time, we thought that really it wanted something much longer to portray the delicacy of what we felt was happening in Iran. And I think that just with the passing of time, it seemed to be more relevant and more possible. The whole tide of more political videos began to happen, and we felt that we really could do it.
Rodney Charters is a director-cameraman who brought his own very special skills to this project. He really sustained this project tremendously. He brought to it a quality that really kept it going.
Mark 51A, take one.
One of the happier accidents in making this video was the discovery of Roya Mahmoudi, who played the role of Mona in the video. Not only was there a remarkable similarity in appearance between Roya and Mona, but there was also a special warmth and spirit that she brought to the making of the video, very reminiscent, I'm sure, of Mona's qualities, that made it more like a real-life experience than simply a recreated one. She also was very concerned about the authenticity and the accuracy of portraying the story. And I think that was probably because her mother and father-in-law were abducted and executed in Iran in 1981.
I think you push her with...
I'm trying to get a feeling of what the Baha'is are going through there. And it's really tough. People think so. We have the information about it, we hear about it. Not till you've partaken of it do I really think that you can feel what's going on. And I really feel that I've only gotten a glimpse of it, even though I've played out the role completely. What would go on in the mind of a 16-year-old, I don't know. Someone that fresh, someone who enjoys life that much. And yet Mona seems to be someone who is extraordinarily mature and very in tune with her beliefs and her understanding of what a human being is.
Mona, like her father, had a deep love for the Baha'i teachings. She also loved to draw and to write poetry. When the guards came to arrest her, her mother asked, "Why are you arresting a 16-year-old child?" The guard showed her mother one of Mona's poems and said, "This isn't written by a child. This kind of poem could set the world on fire." Mona's mother was imprisoned for 5 months at the same time as Mona. And when she came into the prison, Mona took her aside and asked her to do something for her. She said, "Mother, don't treat me in any special way. I want you to show your love and affection to all these other prisoners so that they won't think that I'm lucky to have my mother here. I want you to be a mother to all of them, just like you would be to me."
I've never seen him dressed like this.
Artin Mahmoudi is Roya's husband, and he came to Toronto to work on the Mona project for 2 reasons. The first was Roya. He wanted to come and support her and to help her through what was going to be a very difficult weekend because she had to play the role of Mona. And secondly, he came because he really understands what Mona went through. His own parents shared the same fate as Mona in Iran. They were executed. And we also managed to find him a role as one of the male prisoners in the prison scene.
My parents were both martyred in Iran. My father was the member of the National Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran, which were abducted in 1980, in August of 1980. And since then, we have not heard from them, and they're presumed to be dead. Subsequent to that, another National Assembly was elected, and my mother happened to be on that assembly. They were arrested in December of 1981, and 2 weeks later were executed.
In case you have just joined us, you are watching a special episode of Baha'i on Air about the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. We will continue in a moment with this Canadian documentary, Mona's Story, which relates the story of a 17-year-old high school student from Shiraz, Iran, who was executed at the height of the Iranian Revolution along with 9 other Baha'i women for teaching Baha'i children about their own faith. But first, a little more history about why the persecution began and how it continues. When the Baha'i faith began to grow and spread, the authorities in Iran, considering it to be a heresy, exiled Baha'u'llah in the hope that his influence would soon die out. Baha'u'llah was sent to what was then the outer reaches of the Ottoman Empire, the prison city of Akka, situated in what was then Muslim territory, but is now known as northern Israel. There he remained for the last 40 years of his life, still in exile. Across the bay from Akka, in Haifa, is the shrine of the Bab, the young prophet who had foretold the coming of Baha'u'llah and who was subsequently executed. His remains are buried here on the spot selected by Baha'u'llah at a time when the mountain was barren rock. This area, which is considered holy by the Baha'is, is now beautifully landscaped. Shown here during the dedication ceremonies which mark the opening of the terraces, it is visited by Baha'is from throughout the world, as well as by thousands of people who follow other faiths or no faith. And now we return to Mona's story.
Mona with the children, send your love to me. Send your every precious moment you'll be dancing. Every precious moment you'll be free. Children, send your love to me. Send your love around the world. Our souls go dancing.
I would like a close-up on the same thing.
In the written document that we have where the mullah asks Mona herself, why are you a Baha'i? And she explains that in the Baha'i faith, we investigate the truth and our beliefs ourselves. It's something that I read myself, I find out about myself. It's not just because my parents are Baha'i.
Action.
And I think that's what makes her special, because this is something she has read about, something she's internalized, something she believes in so strongly that not even all the tortures she's seen, the interrogations she's been through, she's been able to tolerate it because of her belief, and alone her belief.
When they asked her, what could she say? She said, you can't break my heart, you can't take my faith away. When they told her the price that she would pay, she said, take my...
Through the interrogation, that's where the strength comes to me. Just looking into that face and thinking that here they'd be with a 16-year-old and they give that much importance that they know that they can't get it out of any assembly members, any National Spiritual Assembly members, and now they're resorting to children. It's ridiculous.
To hear them say, save your life and throw your faith away.
The roles of the 9 other women who were executed with Mona were played by Iranian Baha'i women. 2 of them were very unique in one sense in that they had both experienced firsthand imprisonment in Iranian prisons. They were Mrs. Mavadat and a young woman named Ruhi Jahanpur. Ruhi was in prison with Mona for 4 months. She was a chemistry teacher in Shiraz. She was released from prison and escaped from Iran through Pakistan and is now a Baha'i refugee living in Canada. She brought an unbelievable contribution to this project. She consulted with us all the way through and told us what the prisons were like inside and told us what the interrogation rooms were like and helped us understand why the guards would be dressed like they were dressed.
The first time that I was arrested, I was alone, and they just took me to the prison, and then they put me in a cell. But the second time, I was arrested with my friend Shirin, and when we got to the cell, we found out that there are some other Baha'i women. They tied me to a bed and they beat the soles of my feet. They just said, are you Baha'i? I said, yes. And they said, will you convert to Islam? I said, no. And again, they continue beating me for 74 lashes.
I think it would work a lot better, wouldn't it? Because we just see the whole back of your feet, just a massive red. Yeah.
We chose Mona's story because she was the youngest of the 10 women who were executed, and also because she showed a particular kind of courage and strength. The man who drove the women to their execution told later that the authorities, in a last effort to try and break the spirit of these women and to force them to recant their faith, had hanged them one at a time. Mona asked to be last so that she could pray for the strength and steadfastness of the others. And when her turn came, she kissed the noose and said a prayer for the happiness of all humanity. Mona was deeply in love with her faith and dedicated her whole life to serving humanity and to the cause of peace. Her story shows us that she wasn't defeated by her circumstances, and that the love that she felt enabled her to be brave in the face of great cruelty. At one point when she was in prison, she said to her mother, "Mother, if I felt that my execution would result in the youth all around the world joining hands and moving forward in service to humanity, learning about the Baha'i principles, and dedicating their lives to service and to peace," she said then that she would suffer 100,000 executions if that could be brought about.
You have been watching a Canadian documentary relating the true story of a 17-year-old high school student from Shiraz, Iran. Mona Mahmoudnejad was executed at the height of the Iranian Revolution along with 9 other Baha'i women for teaching Baha'i children about their own faith. In just over 150 years, the Baha'i faith has spread to virtually every country and territory of the world, including New Zealand, where there are several thousand Baha'is. It is now considered to be the second most widespread religion in the world. The Baha'i faith teaches the elimination of all forms of prejudice, including social, religious, racial, and so on. Nevertheless, over the years, the Baha'is of Iran have been variously labelled as agents of Tsarist Russia, of Imperial Britain, or of America, as spies for Israel, or as agents of Zionism. No matter what regime is in power, the Baha'is have still suffered persecution. However, it is a fundamental teaching of the Baha'i faith that we must be obedient to the government of the country in which we reside and to avoid all partisan political activity. If any of the Baha'i files, which have been confiscated by the Iranian government over the many years, had produced any shred of evidence in support of the accusations that had been made against the Baha'i community, they would surely have been produced by now. They have not. In the years immediately following the 1979 revolution, members of many of the democratically elected councils that normally govern the affairs of the Baha'i community were shot. Others simply disappeared and are now presumed dead. Later, in 1983, the Iranian government banned the Baha'i administrative system, so the Baha'i community no longer has the means of governing those institutions which normally guide the affairs of the community. Thousands of Baha'is were forced to become refugees after their homes were either confiscated or burned. Other homes may be raided at any time, and property including books, computers, and other belongings may be confiscated without explanation. Baha'is employed by the government have been fired for no reason other than their being Baha'is, and in some cases have been required to repay all that they earned. Other businesses have been instructed to fire Baha'i employees, and Baha'i-owned businesses have been instructed to close down. Baha'is may be arrested at any time, and often are. Generally, no charges are laid against them, and they may be charged with such things as apostasy or disturbing the minds of the public. They are usually released after paying large sums of bail or making available deeds to property and businesses. Baha'i cemeteries have been destroyed and the bodies of the dead have been disinterred. For more than 2 decades, Baha'is have been banned from gaining a tertiary education, and attempts by Baha'is themselves to educate their own youth have resulted in the confiscation of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property, including books, computers, and laboratory equipment. Baha'i academics who were teaching the Baha'i youth were arrested, and more than 500 Baha'i homes have been raided in the search for educational material. Of the many holy places, this house, regarded as the birthplace of the Baha'i faith, was one of the most sacred. It was visited by many non-Iranian Baha'is, including New Zealanders, before being reduced to a pile of rubble in 1983. This film was secretly shot on 8mm camera at great risk to the photographer, after the authorities of the time ignored appeals made by the Baha'i communities around the world. Since then, other Baha'i holy places have also been destroyed. In 1993, the United Nations Commission on Human Rights released a confidential document of the Iranian leadership, which set out guidelines for dealing with the Baha'i question. This document, endorsed by the Supreme Leader of Iran, stated that, quote, "The government's dealings with them, the Baha'is, must be in such a way that their progress and development are blocked." Close quote. This document confirmed that the events that had been taking place for some years were part of an official government policy. In our next episode, we will continue to look at the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, who are not protected under the constitution of that country and are regarded as unprotected infidels. Thank you for watching Baha'i On Air. I hope you'll join us next time. I'm Bev Watson. Ka kite.
Buddhism.
Hurt not others as you yourself would find hurtful.
Judaism.
We should love our neighbors as we love ourselves.
Christianity.
Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you.
Islam.
Desire for your brother that which you desire for yourself.
Baha'i.
Blessed is he who prefers his brother before himself. In a world where religious difference is often the cause of dissension and strife, it's good to know there's a place where we can all be one.